what was the strangest rule you had to respect at a friend's house? Story 1. A good friend of mine went through a season where he didn't have running water at his house. So the rule in the house was that no one could come over unless they brought a couple of gallons of water with them to pour into the toilet in the event that they had to use it. Opinion. Thankfully, I've never had to deal with something like that myself, but I bet it scared away a bit of the visitors who had to bring their own water. Story 2. A friend wasn't allowed in her room unless she was sleeping or changing her clothes. She wasn't allowed to shower for more than 10 minutes. Her brother was also locked out of his room and was forced to take cold showers. Also, they wouldn't play with themselves. Opinion. That's pretty extreme. It probably made for a really tense home environment. In my opinion, it might backfire and could even end up making kids more obsessed with those things. Story 3. We had to keep our hands above the covers when we went to sleep so they could make sure we weren't doing anything. I was 9. Literally was the last time I spent a night there. Weirdos. Opinion. That's really strange and uncomfortable, especially for a 9-year-old who probably didn't even have that kind of thing in mind. I can see why you never stayed over there again. Not justifying it at all, but it does make me wonder if the mom had something bad happen to her in the past. I can't think of another reason she would consider such a rule normal. Story 4. I was around 8 when I went to a friend's place for a play date and asked for a cup of water. Friend's mom pulled out one of the biggest glasses 8-year-old me had seen and filled it to the brim. I was only used to the small plastic cups at this stage, so was not used to such a large amount of water. After drinking just over a 1/4 of the glass, I went to pour it out because I didn't want the rest. I was full up. Friend stopped me and said that we weren't allowed to pour out water. We had to drink it. 8 years old me thought that was weird, but looking back, sure. A good way to teach kids not to waste water, especially here in Australia, where droughts are so common. So if I wasn't allowed to pour it out, what could I do with it? I thought I would just leave it for later. The friend once again stopped me and explained I wasn't allowed to leave it. I had to drink it all. I said I wasn't thirsty anymore when her mom walked in and told me that water wasn't allowed to be wasted in this house, and I better drink it all, like right then and there. If you wanted water, you weren't allowed to leave it and come back later. You had to sit there and finish it. 8-year-old me tried to argue why I couldn't leave it for later, and the mom got angry and had me sit at the kitchen bench stool and finish this massive glass. I sat there grumpily for ages, trying to finish this thing so I could go back to playing. I remember getting really uncomfortable because I needed to pee, and sure enough, immediately afterward I was dashing to the toilet. I get teaching kids not to just waste water, but let them leave it and come back later. It's water, it won't spoil, and they will drink it later. Opinion. Forcing an 8-year-old to drink a huge glass of water all at once and not allowing you to leave it behind doesn't sound too reasonable to me. While the intent was to teach not to waste water, it might have been better to either let you come back to it later, or maybe, just maybe, just not give kids so much water at once. That way, it would be less uncomfortable and still teach the same lesson. Story 5. When I was like 8 years old, I was playing at a friend's house in his room upstairs. Needed to go to the bathroom, so I went to the toilet that was upstairs. His mom heard me from downstairs living room, but didn't know how. She was probably eavesdropping or something. Was yelled at while using the bathroom that this toilet was not for daytime use, nighttime only for some reason. So his mom yelled and demanded the 8-year-old me to stop what I was doing, run downstairs, and finish it on the daytime toilet. Never was invited again. Still to this day, I don't have a clue what went on there, and still have so many unanswered questions. Opinion. Being yelled for no apparent reason and then having to run downstairs to finish on a different toilet sounds incredibly confusing and stressful. And it's odd that whenever a home has weird toilet rules, they never seem to make them known in advance. Story 6. No coughing in the kitchen. It doesn't matter that the kitchen was huge, or if you covered your mouth. And this was 25 years before what happened in 2019. I learned the hard way one Thanksgiving. As an invited guest at my friend's house, I naturally entered the kitchen to ask if her mother needed any help. A sudden tickle hit the back of my throat, and I coughed to clear it. Her mother looked at me furiously, turned around, picked up the tray with the cooked turkey on it, and proceeded to throw it in the garbage. I was shocked. I ended up leaving shortly after. Opinion. It's wild that coughing in a large kitchen could lead to something like throwing out the turkey. It's surprising how some home rules can be so strict and not clearly communicated. I would love to see how they would react if they saw the cooking conditions at the restaurants they ate at. They would probably starve. Story 7. No one was allowed to swim in the swimming pool because it was only for decoration. Other than that, they were normal parents. Edit. We were all in high school. There was no threat of anyone drowning. Opinion. That's a really odd rule. A pool only for decoration seems like a missed opportunity, especially since you were all in high school and there was no drowning risk. Sounds like a classic I don't want to supervise children for hours in the pool excuse. Story 8. I went around my friend's house for dinner one night, and then the plan was to go and see Return of the King at the cinema. Ate food and chatted with him and his family. Everything was normal. Then the time came to go to the cinema, and his family said to me, "Would you mind taking Gandalf?" What? Turns out they had a 6-foot cardboard cutout of Gandalf upstairs, and they had taken him to the first 2 LOTR movies, and it had become a tradition. So I go upstairs, find the massive cardboard cutout, and struggle to drag him down the stairs. At this point, the family is in the car waiting for me. I mutter to myself thinking, how is this gonna fit in the car? I drag Gandalf to the car and open the door, and they're all laughing at me. There was no tradition. They were just teasing me. Opinion. That's a hilarious and unexpected prank. After all the sad and weird stories I read on this topic, this one actually made me laugh. Story 9. Finally, an Ask Reddit for me. I grew up homeschooled up until my first year of high school. Let me tell you, I met a lot of really cool people with awesome families, but also a lot of really strange families. Homeschooling can be great until it's used for the wrong reasons, which in my experience is shockingly common. A list of weird rules I had to follow while over at different houses within homeschooling groups I was part of. 1. No red nail polish. Her daughters couldn't paint their nails red, or even wear the color red. If we were going to come over, we had to remove any red nail polish and wear non-full colors. 2. Could not say "oh my gosh" because it sounded too much like "oh my god," and it's a sin to take God's name in vain. 3. We needed to cover our shoulders before her brothers, and especially her father returned home. 4. Not a rule that I personally had to follow, but one family banned the use of Crest toothpaste. Their parents had something against the brand? I'm not sure on this one, to be honest. 5. Was not allowed to be alone in the same rooms as friend's father. As an adult, I get why, but at the time I was like, huh? 6. One family I knew wasn't allowed to listen to music that their father didn't like. Not because he didn't like it because it was anti-Christian. He simply just didn't like the sound. They couldn't buy albums or download songs that he wouldn't listen himself. They were able to listen to a lot of 80s stuff, which isn't a problem, but like, come on. 7. Could not address her parents as anything other than yes, sir, or yes, ma'am. That's all that I could immediately pull off the top of my head. It's been years, Lemel. Opinion. That's quite a list. I think it's because every homeschooling family sets their own standards and practices that they come up with such unique rules. But I'm still trying to understand how colors could be considered though. Story 10. No one was allowed to laugh at the dinner table or talk other than to ask, please pass the salt. No one was allowed to leave the table, even for an emergency, until the dad was done eating. Opinion. Not laughing or talking at the dinner table and having to wait until the dad is finished eating sounds like a very weird environment. It's confusing because that kind of setup kind of defeats the whole point of eating as a family, right? Story 11. It wasn't really a rule of the house, but my friend's parents were huge helicopter parents. Went to a concert with a friend and we had to call, not text, her parents every hour to let them know we were okay. We were 21, 22, and I was close friends with the band we were seeing play. Opinion. Having to call every hour to check in with your helicopter parents at a concert must have been quite a hassle, especially since you were close friends with the band. It's so weird when even as adults some parents still need constant reassurance. I think my response would be, no, you raised me, time to trust you did a good job. Story 12. As a single parent with 3 young children, I used to have a nanny come help out, and occasionally she would bring her son. One day, as I was picking up my children, the nanny's son passed gas, and she made him stand in the corner. He was only allowed to pass gas in the bathroom. He was 4, by the way. Opinion. I was taught something similar. Only pass gas if there's no one else in the room. But if it happened by accident, there was no way my parents would have made me stand in the corner for it. I swear, some parents traumatize their kids without even noticing. Story 13. Stayed at a friend's house one night and the family communicated exclusively through whispering. Not just hushed voices but full-on hand-to-ear. That made me so confused. Opinion. That's so creepy. It's wild how some family practices can be so weird and make even basic interactions seem strange and uncomfortable. Story 14. House rule. When eating dinner with their family, we weren't allowed to have a beverage of any kind, including water with our meal. Had to wait until we were finished. Opinion. I grew up hearing that drinking liquids with your meals can dilute stomach acid and make digestion difficult. So while it might seem strict, I think there's a bit of logic behind it. Story 15. We had to walk on a plastic sheet that was everywhere in the house. It was like a little 2-foot wide trail. Opinion. Walking on a plastic sheet just to protect the carpet sounds quite cumbersome, and it must have made the house look awful. It reminds me of a documentary I saw where a family bought a mansion and wrapped everything, even the toilet, in plastic to keep it pristine. Story 16. My friend's mom's boyfriend had one of those rooms we weren't allowed in for any reason. The problem was, it was the living room. It was impossible to get to the kitchen without going through that living room. Also, couldn't reach the door to the backyard. So I never once entered the kitchen in that house, and any trips to the backyard meant walking out the front door and going through the gate on the side of the house. Opinion. Sounds really inconvenient. My childhood friend dealt with a similar rule at her aunt's place. Apparently, we kids were too dirty and would ruin the living room. But she let her dogs run straight in from the garden and hop onto the couch. It didn't make much sense. Story 17. Parents waking us up like 7 a.m. to make us do chores. Had another friend whose parents were so strict that he often got grounded in the middle of play dates and sleepovers. His parents were wealthy, and he always had cool toys and electronics, but he was constantly grounded from them. Opinion: God. That moment when you're at a friend's house and they get in trouble, and their parents don't get how crazy they look screaming in front of another kid. It's always so awkward. Story 18. My friend had a hall with light switches at each end. If you flipped one switch up to turn the light on, you could flip the other switch up to turn the light off again. It was entirely possible to get the light off with both switches in the up position. This drove my friend's wife nuts. So the rule was that you had to keep both switches down when the lights were off. Often this meant walking the length of the hall to flip a switch, followed by a return trip in the dark. Opinion: I'm actually guilty of this myself. My kitchen has switches like that, and it does drive me nuts. It's not a rule, but I'll often walk across the kitchen to make sure both switches are in the off position when the lights are off. And just to clarify, no, I don't have OCD. Now that I think on it, my bedroom has two switches too, but I don't really care what position they're in. Story 19. No sitting in the living room. All the furniture was covered in plastic. The living room was considered for show only. Opinion: I think this is odd, but I understand that it is common in some cultures where preserving a pristine appearance for special occasions or guests is very important. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and activate the bell button to receive notifications to my latest videos.